Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Backshed Bible Study. It is Monday, January 4th, 2021. We are at episode 40 of the Backshed, which means for those of you that have been following along, we are in 43 weeks of COVID. 43 weeks of COVID because we've had a few backsheds that we haven't done in between then. But it's good to have you here. And I'd like to welcome my special guest today, Kent Carlson, joining me all the way from way up there in El Dorado Hills today. In his, is it your encampment? Is that what that is up there?
The compound. We refer to it as a compound.
Yeah. There are some of those around this country.
There are indeed.
Kathy Wainscott, good morning. Welcome. It's good to see you joining us bright and mid-morning here, and Happy New Year to you as well. A fun time. Now, Kent, this is going to be fun as I get to expose you. I have junk calls coming in on my phone right now as we're doing this.
Usually I'd be calling just to get your phone to ring on the show.
Right. My problem is in an Apple world, everything's all connected. So my phone rings, and even though it's silenced, it starts coming up on my computer, and all these people get to hear it. Kent, you are. I'm going to attempt to define your position, and then we'll go from there. But you are the regional minister. Regional minister, right?
That's correct.
Okay, for the NorCal Association of the North American Baptist Conference.
That's good. It's hard to fit on a business card, but yes.
Did I get all that right?
No one has business cards anymore, so it doesn't matter.
I have 500 of them, and they're completely useless.
I use them for bookmarks.
My kids love them.
Yeah.
Maggie Lagos, good morning. It is 52 degrees and raining up here in Fair Oaks, and I'm guessing in Palm Desert maybe it's raining, but a lot warmer than that. So Kent, tell us a little bit about what you do for NAB, for NorCal specifically. Help us to get to know you. You were at one of our sister churches as a pastor for quite a while, and would love to hear a little bit about that. But tell us who you are, so the folks out there that are watching can get to know you a little bit.
Well, thank you. I'm brand new on this position of the regional minister for NorCal. Started full-time in October, and but I've been a part of NorCal for 36 years now. And so, but I came out here to start Oak Hills Church in 1984. Actually was recruited by Gene Kern and
Kern, I love it.
And so Sunrise really our mother sponsoring church.
Sure.
So I spoke there years and years ago. When I first came out, I was a tad bit younger than I am now. But I started Oak Hills Church. I was there for 32 years. We had a great ministry, continues to just be wonderful. There's a whole story with that for another time. But at about 32 years in, maybe I should have done it a decade earlier in this, I realized I was not going to be the guy to lead them into the future. You just got to make more space around the table for other voices. And so I was going out to kind of start my own gig, some of my own consulting work with churches and such. But NAB, who I've had this long time relationship with, through a elaborate process, offered me a new position at NAB, carve out a new position of vice president of leadership formation.
Okay.
So I was doing that for about 5 years. Working all over the United States and Canada. Got to go to Cameroon once, which was marvelous. Talking about the whole missional formational movement that we've been pushing in NAB. And this position of regional minister was one that I was not expecting. When I was approached about it, I found it, it wasn't even on my radar screen. But I kept praying about it and thinking about it, and they, the NorCal people kept talking to me, and I realized to some degree, in terms of kingdom work, the front lines, if sorry for the warfare metaphor here, but the front lines are the local church, pastoring in the local church. International office about 10 miles behind the front lines, and the regional minister position is a mile behind the front lines.
Yeah.
And I get to work where the action is with pastors in this extraordinarily fascinating, challenging, difficult time in the church, capital C church, rethinking who the church needs to become at the end of Christendom, not at the end of Christianity, obviously, but the end of Christianity being the center cultural power in the culture. That's ending. It's not coming back.
Right.
And for good reason, and for the benefit of the church to a large degree. But it takes us some time to rethink what the church is going to be like. So I get to hang with pastors, hungry pastors, young pastors, thinking about how do we reimagine and dream together what the church will become. So that's what I'm doing now, and having an absolute blast. I'm borderline giddy about my job right now.
Well, I love when I found out that you were the one that was going to be replacing Rick Weber, which Rick, for a point of, I don't know what my point is, but Rick was actually my episode number 2 Backshed Bible Study. So we had him early on. Actually, it may have been episode 1. In fact, things did not go well because I had no clue what I was doing with the technology. And
well, he's 1, and then I'm 40, so he begins, and 40 is a very biblical number as well. So I think that's good. Well, yeah, replacing Rick Weber everywhere I go. It says Rick Weber's the greatest RM that has ever been here, and we just hope that you'll measure up to some degree. So my motto and my regime is don't screw it up, essentially.
well, for all y'all out there, this is a fun part. Is Rick Weber is someone who would work behind the scenes to really encourage all of us who are pastors, as Kent would say, on the front lines. And he was a huge support to Sunrise. And Kent, you have been a great support to Sunrise along the way. And you even consulted with our entire elder team as we were trying to figure out what we were looking for in a new senior pastor. And that was, I remember a very significant evening with you in what is now Luke's office, really meeting with our team and helping us understand a lot more of where we should be going. And so I'm just grateful for who you are for Sunrise. And I think you're going to have a lot of insight for us today. And as Micah Paul said in the comment section here a minute ago, this looks like a fun topic today, as the teaser is that I put it in there. So let me say just a couple of things we're going to jump into. I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
But I do want to say Valerie Connor is on here, and Valerie missed your birthday yesterday. So happy birthday from all of us at Sunrise. I hope you had a fantastic birthday yesterday. And I see Lisa Lavering's on board. Kent, do you know Lisa? She knows you, I think.
Yes, indeed. What a name from the past. Hey, Lisa.
So she's excited for. They went to Oak Hills for a while. That's how.
That's our slogan. Oak Hills Church. I used to go there. That's the.
I'll always be somewhere with the pastor, and I've got to tell you this just in front of a few other people that are watching today. We only have 9 people watching right now, but I was at lunch with 2 other pastors several years ago, and so it's 2 other pastors from 2 different churches, and someone from our church walks up to the table, and every single one of us knows him. And after he leaves, I go, well, I'll say John is his name, because if I say his name, everyone will probably know. But I'm like, well, yeah, John goes to Sunrise. And the person next to me is like, yeah, and he used to go to my church. And then the other one's like, yeah, and he went to my church before that. So anyway, if y'all move around churches, we all talk about you, just so you know.
Well, they talk about us, so it's the same.
Right, exactly. Okay, Kent, I've got a few questions that I want to prime the pump with here. But there is a trend in Christendom. I love that you brought that up, that Actually, let's start by this.
Sure,
Define for us, so we can, use a working definition for that, but current Christendom, what that is.
sure. Well,
And
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, to give it a quick, Christianity began on the margins of society. It was an outlawed religion,
Yeah.
um, outlawed experience with God, and it thrived in that environment. For the first 300 years, there were tremendous persecutions, not all the time, but periodically you'd come along and the Roman authorities would say, "Is Caesar Lord?" and or "Is Jesus Lord?" And if you said Jesus is Lord, you could be executed. In fact, people talk about how Christianity is not political. To the contrary, it's extraordinarily political. Its major statement at the beginning was that Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. And so, but it was a faith of peace, serving the least, and on the margins of society with other people who are marginalized. What happened in the fourth century, first with Constantine, who for some reason decided he was going to be a Christian. We don't know all the reasons why, but he allowed Christianity to be a legal religion in the Roman Empire. Later in that century, towards the end of it, Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. So now we have the Holy Roman Empire. So Christianity becomes associated with the state, with the government. You move on, fast forward, of course, leaving out all sorts of information, but you have the state churches in Europe where you were baptized in the same sense of becoming a citizen.
Right.
The United States was essentially established in a similar kind of thing, although not associated with the state, but with the sense of a quasi-Christian state. And so but that's all changing. Europe, of course, has left the state churches. Christianity is very much on the margins there. In Canada's around 10 years, 20 years ahead of us. But in all metropolitan areas on the East Coast, West Coast, Christianity is very much on the margins of society. But in all small towns in Bismarck now have soccer practice on Sunday morning.
Right.
We would never have done that 15 years ago. And so we no longer as Christians are in the center of political, social, cultural power any longer. We are moving out to the margins, where Christianity did a marvelous job of witnessing to the reality of Christ among us.
Right. And but this brings a huge tension to all of us that have grown up in the church and enjoyed, um kind of the church being the center of things, and the things that are, our value set being the value set that kind of govern a nation and a culture and so on. And I think all of us feel this tension of we're watching these things erode. And even there was the prayer that happened yesterday at the opening of the House of Representatives, where they prayed in the name of several different gods and said amen and ah women at the end, which was fascinating. So check it out online. It's an interesting thing. And I think a lot of us kind of just feel that angst, that this thing that we've been holding tightly on, is we're losing our grip on it.
Well, it's kind of interesting if you compare the Bible and the Quran, and I'm not a Muslim scholar by any means, but the Quran seems to be written with the sense of an assumption that Islam will be the governing force.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible is not written like that at all. The Bible is written by people who are oppressed, to people who are oppressed, by people who are exiles, to people who are exiles, the vast majority of it.
Yeah.
And so when we read the Bible from a place of power, we really have a difficult time being able to actually understand it. And so when we think about Christendom ending, many people get fearful that that's a bad thing. In my mind, what we have to come to grips with, well, there's a word that missiologists use called syncretism. For example, in South America, Africa, where the Catholic Church came in, there were these Catholicism kind of moved with the animistic indigenous religions there. So they had this the syncretistic kind of expression of Christianity. That's happening in the United States as well. Our Christianity is now in many ways indistinguishable from nationalistic desires. We equate Christianity with being an American.
Right.
And in such a way, we've really harmed our understanding of Christianity, particularly when we get linked up with a certain political party or a certain political agenda. And so this is one of the opportunity for us to be back on the margins will help us claim our identity as an alternative people.
So what do we do with this though? Help me with this, because I've struggled with this a little bit, because I agree 100%. Like that's where the church came from. It's how it was written, and yet we can't control the fact that we have grown up in a nation that was incredibly friendly to the church, and you're in my tax situation is a benefit of being a part of tax law that's written that way, and so on. And what do we do? Like, should we desire for the church to return to that marginalized point? Should we try to hold on to the church having a central point? I mean, I think a lot of us just naturally want to try to keep things the way they were, but
And I want to say the way things were not that good.
oh,
In terms
good
of
zinger to throw in there, Kent.
well, I think the non-church people are leaving the church in droves. Gen Z millennials are leaving the church in droves. Our Christian witness has been very effective in our little bubbles, but not out in the world. If you hang out with non-church people, it's not that they're against Christians, it's just they're not impressed. There's nothing different. And so I think our particularly in this heated political environment, our prophetic witness has really been harmed in terms of what actual Christianity looks like. Our young people are seeing this, and it is a very, very a dangerous time. Not dangerous. Let me go back on that. It's a tremendous opportunity to reimagine what the church can be, and it requires us to quit clinging onto power. When we cling onto power, I even see Christians now talking in such a way they want to bring kingdom means or kingdom ends through non-kingdom means.
Right.
You just can't do that. It's not Christianity. And so it is always the way of Jesus, which is the way of peace, of love, of losing my life for the sake of others, not demanding my rights, not worrying that something's being taken away from me. It's just not the way of Christ.
Right. And I think this has been especially punctuated during the COVID season.
Yes, exactly. Yes, indeed.
Right. And I know that we have experienced this firsthand in the church, where there's a huge tension between our rights as Americans and our responsibility as citizens of
Yes.
heaven, right?
Yes.
And I know a tension that I think a lot of people in our church are struggling with is, okay, I've got the Bible here, but the Constitution and Declaration of Independence kind of are right here, and for some of them, it shoots up there for a few minutes and comes back.
Yeah.
But that's a tension a lot of people are living in, and where we have. I'm a little hesitant to come out and say some of this in live here, but I think there's been a wrongly placed position of the church that the church should be standing up for our constitutional rights, when I feel like the job of the church is to proclaim Jesus Christ. And
I think Alan Hirsch has a tremendous metaphor on this. He talks about if you're learning how to play chess, or people are amateurs at playing chess like I am, you really depend on the queen, because she can do anything. She can move any direction and such. If the church is a game of chess, our Sunday services are the queen. And so now during COVID, to some degree, we had to learn to play without the queen in the same way. But if you want to get good at chess, you have to realize that there's all these other pieces on the board that you can't become good at unless you actually learn how to use them. So taking the queen off the board allows us to be the church. We've had a very much of a church as destination. We go to church. People drive 30 miles past 30 churches in order to get to this one church. So it's a destination thing. And that's the church I go to, even though I may not know people there very, very well, because I oriented around the Sunday morning service.
Right.
Well, that's really good for the bubble who do that, but we'll never impact the world with that. So we have to realize that the church is how we are when we're throughout the week, and who we are in living out in community together with other Christians, loving our world. So COVID gave us an opportunity to do that. Not everyone grasped it. If the church is like a tube of toothpaste, the pandemic, the racial unrest, the political unrest, these external tensions have come along and squeezed us. And what has come out is what was already there.
What was inside.
And it's not attractive at times. And it's particularly when we get into these areas of my rights of being a Christian or being, if we just get outside our own country, I work with churches in Canada and they don't have hardly any of the issues that we're having in the United States. The churches in Canada are more or less, well, okay, we should probably do what we can to help our community and stop the spread of the pandemic. But Americans tend to be, we're very suspicious. We don't want to be tread on. We have these individual rights. And somewhere along the line, Christianity gets syncretized with that. And we end up not being able to demonstrate ourselves as being a beautiful people who have an alternative way of living, the way of Jesus.
Right. And it's so interesting. And I always look back to when Paul was able to manage that balance between, when he takes advantage of his Roman citizenship and when he doesn't.
Right. Yeah, we're Americans, and I'm thrilled. I love living in America. It's
exactly.
I just don't ever feel persecuted. I think when we start talking persecution, we have to apologize to the people in the world who actually are persecuted.
Who actually are.
And I can do just about anything. I can still worship God anytime. I can gather with people and do that. And nothing stops us from being the church. No one closed the church. And so I think, and it's a short-term thing. Eventually it will resolve. And so the question is, what is the Spirit of God saying to us in this time? I doubt the Spirit of God is saying, we got to fight the man. We got to stick it to the man. I just don't buy that.
Well, in there are so many people that are just desperate to, that desperately need the hope of Christ in their lives right now. And then yesterday, I think almost everybody that's watching this morning here was at church or watched online yesterday. I gave a message that had been percolating in my heart for about a year on shame and this shame-based society that we live in right now. And I think there are so many people living under that shame and fear of shame, that just desperately need freedom. If there was ever a time for the hope of freedom that comes through Christ to show up, it sure seems like it's right now.
Well, I think throughout the history of the world, ever since Christianity began, during times of national calamity, pandemics, war, Christianity at its best have been these people who have been at the forefront, caring for the least, the most impoverished, and such. By the way, can you hear this noise in my end? This pounding on my window
every once in a while.
So that's Christmas lights that are becoming undone by the wind.
Wind.
So I have no way to fix it right now in this. So.
Well, the noise you would have been hearing from me would have been my dog trying to get in. So
my dog was starting to bark too. So I'm worried. No one's home to stop anything. So we just have to put up with it. By the way, the back shed thing, I was going to say this.
Okay.
This concept of the back shed is where you take people to take the belt out. Is that part of the thing? Is this a place where you you add to the shame as opposed to taking it away, or
Right. Well, see, when I grew up, it was like, I'm going to take you out behind the shed. So I always thought, like, if you're in the shed, it's not behind the shed.
okay, that's good.
The discipline happens out there.
Okay, behind the shed. Okay, good.
I've actually contemplated that exact thing. My parents always said there was a switch they had out back. I'm gonna break me off a switch and let you have it.
No one knows what the heck is a switch anyway.
Right. Well, it's a piece of a branch is what
Yeah,
it is.
no,
That's not anymore. Okay. This is way too fun. Okay, Kent, let's talk about, so what kind of things, so this is a hard question for us, but what does it look like for a church like Sunrise, who's been around 40 plus 45 47 years, and what does it look like for us to potentially retool in such a way to be relevant to a community that desperately needs Jesus, that's living under that, so that we're not becoming a destination. And I ask this in context of you've been a big part of Blue Oceans, which is an NAB thing where Pastor Rachel, Kim, and Jen all were part of that, and really challenges us to rethink how church works. So, what are some of the things that you're seeing other churches do to retool, to be more, effective and better light in their communities?
well, speaking generally,
Yeah.
or big picture, we have to begin to decentralize. We have to begin to, I sit in church now at my home church, Oak Hills. I'm still part of that. Pastor Emeritus. Emeritus is Latin for doesn't do anything. But I'm the so I sit there on a Sunday, and I watch people in the service, and they're crying, they're laughing, they have their Bibles open, they're taking notes, they're worshiping, hands are raised. It's all beautiful. But I'm looking around, they don't really know each other. They're not in an intimate community outside on mission. The mission still is to get people to the church and maybe do good deeds. In order to demonstrate an alternative way of life, we have to be in a smaller, decentralized community where everyone's kids are on everyone's refrigerator. Pictures of everyone's kids are on the refrigerators. We eat together regularly. We are hanging out together. Problem so often in many churches that the schedule of the church is so jam-packed, there's no time or room for that. And so small groups, if you're part of one, ends up being just another place where we do Bible study and we hang out together, but we're not on mission. And so the world does not experience that. When we have to understand, when we make a gospel presentation, what are we actually making? When we're inviting people to be followers of Christ, what are we inviting them to? For a very long time, we've invited people to make a personal, individual decision so that their eternity is decided and they'll go to heaven when they die. All that's wonderful and good, but it's not at the core of the biblical message. The first Christians were referred to as followers of the way. So when you are inviting people to become a follower of Jesus, you're inviting people not to make a decision about their eternity, but you're making a decision about now, eternity being a natural result of that. Now coming into a group of people who are walking in the Jesus way, and this is how we're discipled and learn together. We cannot invite people into a way that we're not walking ourselves. And so,
Right.
so the importance of decentralizing in some fashion or form, it's very hard, and I don't recommend it at all, to completely restructure a church along those ways. Number one, I used to say that the cure kills the patient, but really the cure kills the doctor now.
Right. Yeah,
You as a
exactly.
pastor go along and try to change structurally, you'll just get canned and fired, and because the structure, the system is so strong, and there's so many beautiful things happening there.
Right.
And so my big push is towards experimentation, finding the people in our churches who hunger for a different expression of the church, because there's 60 to 70% of the non-church people will never come to church again as it's currently structured. So that's what we refer to this blue ocean, this whole
Right.
unfished, pristine mission field right in our backyard that we have to discover. How do we be the church in a smaller portion in there? Big church has to give support to that, encouragement, celebrate it, tell those stories. And so the hungry people in our church, we have to unleash them, not to serve them big machine, but to unleash them to go out and do experiments.
Well, and that's a tension that I, as a pastor, experience. Is I look at, okay, so I'm going to take you all down a rabbit trail here for a second, but especially as executive pastor, my, my job is to go, how can we do this with less money,
Yeah.
right?
Well, you're the man.
So if we can, we have all these things in the church, small C church, in our church, that need to be done. And okay, so maybe giving's down, 8% a year or something like that, as your giving goes down. And a lot of churches have experienced that same thing. That means you can either do less or serve, fewer people, whatever it is. And so, let's get more people to volunteer to do those things, which seems amazing, except you're having them volunteer to serve other Christians in the church doing what feels like busy work. And
Christians, if you don't, this may sound rude, but if you don't serve them in that way, give them those things they desire, there's another church who's doing it down the street better than you, and they'll go there. That's the whole consumeristic machine,
you said it,
that we're a part of.
yeah.
And it's this is why the structural issues are, salaries, people's whole careers and lives are oriented around, we work for the church.
Yeah.
I think one of the big yes, mine as well. I think one of the big macro movements that will be happening is there'll be so many more bivocational, we actually refer to them now as co-vocational pastors, people who, I know one church in Chicago we work with, they have 5 pastors, none of them are paid anything. No one is allowed to work more than 15 hours a week. And but Upton Sinclair once said, it's very difficult to get someone to understand something if the salary depends upon them not understanding it.
Yeah.
And that's part of that's why whole scale structural change is so hard, and usually painful. And it to some degree, it's disrespectful for the beauty of what's going on already. That's why I think experiments, decentralized experiments are the way to go.
Well, and I love that you say that, because now I'm going to swing around back to the other side for a minute, because it's easy to be critical of what we do. Yep. I mean, we're our own worst enemies with some of that, but the body of Christ and people coming together is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I want to support that. And we have a couple of our Sunday school classes that I've been had a privilege to go be a part of. And these are great communities for people where they truly are sharing their lives, and they're having an impact, and they're giving and doing so much. So I don't want to destroy those things.
Not at all. Not at all.
And to all of you that are watching that think I want to, I don't. I love these communities, but I love it. And Lisa is agreeing over here on my side screen with you, saying,
"Hi, Lisa."
Yeah, she's like, experiment, so good. And I think that's great. And even it makes me think, like, how could we restructure and allocate a certain amount of our budget to be out there for doing experiment.
Like here's a way to look at it. And this will be again, I mean this in the kindest way. It's just kind of the nature of the beast we have now. When you're in church work and you're trying to keep a church going, if you did your actual inventory of your time, so often about 80% of our time is oriented around people to keep them a part of our programs, that if we don't keep them a part of our programs, they'll go someplace else, or they just won't be involved or be discouraged. But it creates this very consumeristic, we're here to serve you. you support that by your giving and attendance. And it's part of the machine. I think what we can do is just begin to shift the percentage of our time away from just stuff that keeps the ball moving, and go towards the 20% of people in our church who want something different, and find out how to come alongside them, how to give them the energy to do that, the resources wherever we can, the training, and have these that missional, well, we refer to it at NAB, this missional formational movement, where people are oriented around the mission of God in our community. And we go there as formed people who are spiritually mature and demonstrating this other way of living.
So good. Because you don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
No, well, it's so destructive to do that. I have some of that burn it all down in me. I'm a child of the 60s, and I was in the Jesus People movement, and so that's in me. But it's just it usually doesn't do that much good.
Right.
So you can be a proponent of the new without being an opponent of the old. And I think what Jesus referred to this often, or not often, but occasionally, with the whole wineskins issue.
Yeah, I just read this yesterday.
And so that whole wineskin issue is crucial to think about. The problem is some people come along and try to do structural change, wineskin change, when they don't have new wine yet. So there's no real need for it. So when you have new wine, meaning the presence of Christ among us is being experienced, and he is changing our lives, and we're developing a love for people outside the church, when that new wine is happening, well, old wineskins won't hold it. You'll be spilling wine all over the place. Now people are saying, okay, what kind of new wineskins do we need to have? So the reality has to be there first.
Gosh, that's good. That's super good. And I even have our Maggie, who's our online member from Southern California. She says a church that is frozen in one era or one method will eventually die.
Absolutely.
You know, she's experienced that in her past. She's worked at churches.
Yeah. Well, churches have a life cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. And unless something happens to change that life, I mean, when Oak Hills began, all their elders were in their 20s. I remember actually one old guy from Sunrise was saying, you can't have elders, everyone's in their 20s. And I said, well, that's all who we have. And now to get an elder in their 20s to be on our elder board is a little trickier, just because of all the institutional memory, the kinds of theological training we kind of expect of our elders.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. And so part of the issue is it's not that what we have is bad. It's just that it's not tooled to take us into the future. And here's a big thing that we need to understand with our millennial children and our Gen Z children who are leaving the church in droves. They will not come back to the church as it's currently structured. So I see all these churches out there, how to figure out programs to get the young people back. And I'm just saying, stop. Please, old pastors, don't wear skinny jeans and that kind of stuff up there. Don't do it. And the phrase I use, and this can sound kind of patronizing, but I'll say it just to be irritating. They're not that interested in taking over daddy's business.
No.
And so we have to recognize we as older have to take on more the role of sage and resource person, mentoring, and then leading us into the future. We will, as older people, will not lead the church into the future. Our younger people have to, but they will have to be given a place at the table where their decisions, their creativity begins to change some of the things that we've been doing.
Well, precisely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, there are a couple of things. If they don't see their generation represented on the platform, they will see, or anywhere around the church, they'll see that they're really not cared for. And if they don't see their generation in some kind of leadership capacity, and not just being there to be used, I think that's one of the things is we assume that young people are teachable. and they want to learn from us that are older. And I don't know, but I have to go back to when I was in my teens and 20s, and I was not exactly a teachable person.
Well, I think on that, I don't disagree, but to tweak it a little bit.
Okay.
You were, I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
5'1".
So you're
51.
so you're like 15 years younger than me. But so when I grew up, this is the 60s. This is moving into Watergate. The phrase back then was question authority. It was trust nobody over 30.
Right.
Those kinds of things, and frankly, for good reason. So when I was that age, I never would have considered having a 60-year-old guy come along and be my mentor because they didn't know anything. It's not that way now. Unless the 60-year-old guy wants the 30-year-old person to do church like they've done it. So
Right.
you don't become wise by getting old. Young fools become old fools. And so you have to pursue wisdom, and you have to and part of that is we have to pursue openness, curiosity, as opposed to ossification and getting stuck in our ways. What we have done, I mean, I spent 32 years planning this one church.
Mm-hmm.
There's no statues to me over there. Most people in the church now don't even know who I am.
Well, yeah,
And so,
right. You're gone for a few years, and you're a distant memory, if that.
so it's so
Right.
weird. This whole legacy thing that people talk about is
Yeah.
embarrassing. Just we have to hold these things loosely and recognize the church is not or should not be oriented about what makes me comfortable. There's no future to that. The young people are going to do it differently. They're going to rethink the church if we give them space. If we don't give them space, they'll just leave. And they're not making noise and they leave. They just leave.
Yeah,
They're
they
just
just
gradually
disappear.
walking out the door.
So, okay, so do you hand over all the seats at the table to them? I mean,
As,
because
as
I'll be
many as
honest, I've had some young people show up at the table, and I'm like,
well, let me say it this way. This is the problem we have. It's like I hear pastors do this a lot. I'm telling young people, come, whatever you want to do, we'll support it. And they don't do it because they're too busy and they're too selfish, et cetera. Well, that's in the category of we want them to come and take over daddy's business. And so when we have this, let's just call the younger people, what we have to do is have a big portion of our ministry and energy oriented around helping them discover what God is calling them to do, give them places to experiment, give them places to lead and fail. We have to develop a culture that celebrates failure. In
right,
baseball, if you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame.
right, yeah, I think batting
And
300 is
yes,
fantastic.
and so I think we have to spend a lot of our leadership time just coming along young people. We need to give them the money, the space, the time to do experiments, the training. We have to have the chops to be able to do that. If all we know how to do is teach people to do what we're currently doing, there's no future for us.
Okay,
And they
so
won't.
what I'm feeling is this won't work if we're going to run the church like a business,
Absolutely not.
because it's not profitable.
No, it's going to be less and less profitable.
Yeah.
And many of the jobs. This is when someone comes to me now and says, "I want to be a pastor," and if they're under 50, I say, make sure you have a career.
Right.
Make sure you have a job, so that you don't. If someone wants to come and plant a church, I say go apprentice as a plumber for a year. Be able to. You can make $70,000 a year being a plumber, and then you go start a church. And
Yeah,
then
I
if
think
for
that's
some
absolutely
reason
brilliant.
you need to take money, you need to work more, then the situation will require it. But what we have now is pastors saying, I want to plant a church. And so now I have to get 200 people coming to church by the end of the second year. And
To
immediately
support a
we ask
salary.
all the wrong questions right at the beginning and we're stuck again. And when I started Oak Hills, all you had to do is have a halfway decent garage band, a place to meet, and could string sentences together that make sense, and you could
Right.
plant a church. But now you can't. If I could be crass, the religious marketplace has shrunk.
Yeah.
And so churches are competing against other churches for a dwindling number of people who are even interested in being a part of church as it's currently structured. Now, these are things that happen over 10 or 20 years, but we're seeing it right in the middle of it.
Oh, Kent, you are stirring up so many
Am I in trouble?
not yet. There are just so many things that I know. If anything, I'm in trouble. Um, like
Well, I think we tried to say that what is beautiful, and
Yeah,
God's in it all.
yeah,
But I think we have to have the maturity and the courage to say that's not the future. And so there has to be some transition. And that's why I'm saying experiments, not wholesale structural change.
right. Well, in something that I've learned over the last several years, I'm going to do a quick little screen share here for people to see. This is a book that was our pastoral staff and elders read probably 6 years ago, called Great Evangelical Recession. And the thing that, and I told you, Kent, when we were talking the other day about this book, that
Yeah, I looked it up.
if you read the first few chapters, you're good, and you got the whole book in the first half of it. But the point that he makes in this is that the church as we know it is not going to exist in 10 years. In the typical church that employs several people, that are doing all the different specialized positions, it's not. Sunrise as it is statistically will not exist in 10 years, according to what he has to say. And in so many ways, Francis Chan in Letters to the Church said the exact same thing, and the church was a small meeting of local people that all had their own vocations, and were pastors. It's exactly what you were saying earlier. And I'm not putting out and proposing today that this is where we go, because hey, I support my family with the salary I'm on
Oh,
at the church, right?
I
I'm
hear.
complicit in this mess.
Yep, as am I.
Right.
But we have to, as leaders, we have the complicity thing. I think it's important for us to grasp as leaders. While we understand there's a system here, a structure that is not going to serve us into the future, while we don't want to burn it all down.
Right.
Uh, I mean, it's fun when someone tries it. Usually doesn't work well, but it's a good case study.
Yeah.
So I don't mind when someone does that. But I think we just have to think. Here's what I believe about the people listening right now, and people who might listen afterwards. There are those few people here or there who, and they're often quite loud, who are demanding things stay the same. But my suspicion is that the vast majority of the people who are listening to this recognize that the world is changing. And while there's some grief to that, they have enough courage and enough love of God and enough love of the world and enough love of their children that they're saying, well, let's do what we need to do.
Right.
Let's change. Let's push it. Those voices are the vast majority. They often don't get the hearing in our churches because they're just good people, don't make messes.
Right.
But I think we need to make some messes. We need to gentle messes. But what was John Lewis? We need to get in some good trouble.
I agree. Whew, Kent, we have just stabbed a stick inside a hornet's nest, and
let's get out of here.
right, it's just, we're just stirring this mess up in such a good and healthy way. And I love what you said right there, and I know we talked about it before we went live here this morning, but it was just this concept that the vocal ones that are trying to hold on to everything that it used to be are the minority.
Yes.
And even as I look across mean, who's making comments here today? Every single one of these people that is dropping comments here cares deeply for the church, cares deeply for people, and they love the Lord, and they want to see him lifted up, right?
Indeed.
And so I'm excited. I love Valerie. Thank you. Don't you think that God will raise up young people to help propel the church forward?
Yes. Well, I think he already is.
Yeah.
But some of them are leaving.
Well, in a lot of my job is to recognize. My job as a pastor is to see them and help lift them up.
Sometimes it's got to be, you got to go like to late at night to some French cafe in a dark corner in the room and get together with these people and plot the overthrow, because they slink in the shadows a little bit more. But
well, there's a great. I
wear little berets.
I learned this word a couple of years ago. I was flying out to Colorado and by myself, and I opened up Southwest magazine and I start reading this article about, I think it was Airbnb over in the Silicon Valley. They brought in this guy from another company to help change their HR. Their HR was a disaster. And they bring him in, and he's an old guy that has great success, but the guy knows nothing about the internet. He doesn't even have a smartphone, but he knows people. And he's brought in actually from the hospitality industry to help change their HR culture, but he ends up getting changed in that time too. I mean, he has to have all these young people teach him how to use the technology. He's trying to teach them how to actually talk to people in person and be hospitable. And he creates this word called Mentorn, which I loved it. He's like, I am a mentor and I am an intern. And the person I'm working with is my mentor. And I mean, it was such a great, mutual learning from each other, which I think young people absolutely desire that. And I desperately need it.
Yep. And it's there. People will not lead unless they're actually given places to lead. And so we just have to face the fact that in larger, older, established churches, there's less places for that. And so we have to create, and there's not necessarily a great desire for people to take over leadership there because they would do it.
So we should be experimenting and giving them a place to lead, right?
And they can create their own things and celebrate every failure. I mean, people don't like when I say that, but we have to celebrate. I mean, we actually should throw a parade, because when someone fails and we celebrate it, they'll go try again.
They'll try again.
In our culture, everything is about success. If someone fails, then we say, we'll never try that again.
Well, I had
churches.
I had a word up on my whiteboard. It was said, just learn to fail well.
Yeah.
And I think that way we could have a whole other discussion on that. Yes, Mentorn, standing in the gap. Yes, that's correct, Sharon. You nailed it. Okay, we could go on and on, but we have far departed past our landing time.
Okay. Yes, indeed.
But I think you've given us a lot to chew on this morning, and I am so grateful. I would sure appreciate if we can just continue this conversation over time. And, obviously, Luke's heart for Sunrise and for who he is. And I think in this climate that we are living in right now, this is kind of how things have to start moving. So I'm excited because there's a lot of unknown, but God's going to show himself faithful through it.
Well, I always enjoy being taken out to the tool shed or the back shed or whatever, and it would be it would be a blast to come and join in. Absolutely. I mean, I love the Sunrise staff. I mean, the three women who did did Blue Ocean with us. They're amazing. Yeah. So fun.
Oh, and Rachel's been dropping comments on here the whole morning here.
Oh, Rachel. Okay, good. Rachel, way to go. And Luke's been a friend for some years. I've been up
Yeah.
at Kingdom a number of times, and I was thrilled when he's coming down here. So and Sunrise is like in my, DNA, because I went to Sunrise while I was starting Oak Hills, and so
Oh, it's so
it's
crazy.
fun to be a part of all that. So.
Well, Kent, as we close, normally I would take my time here at the end and pray for our guest, but would you be willing to pray for us, pray for Sunrise as we close out here this morning?
My pleasure, my great pleasure.
Okay.
Father, thank you for Cliff and this beautiful thing that you've inspired him to create in this messy back shed of his, and for all the conversations in this past year, the fun stuff that has happened here, the serious stuff, I'm sure the laughter, I'm sure the tears, all the beautiful things that have gone on. And this is something that you have done. And I thank you for Cliff's faithfulness in this. I thank you for Sunrise Church and the witness it has been in this community for such a long time. And now, not only Sunrise, but all churches have a new challenge to reimagine what the church can be like going into the future, to be able to reach in some fashion or form the 60 to 70% of non-church people who will never come to our church again as it's currently constructed, certainly currently structured. And also the 70% plus of millennials and Gen Z who are gone and won't come back to the church as it's currently structured. Help us to celebrate what we have and how to continue to celebrate what you are doing now among us, and at the same time dream together and imagine together what the future might look like. And so protect all the leaders at Sunrise who have impossible jobs before them, balancing whatever it takes to keep the church going and all the demands there, but also to pay attention clearly what your spirit is leading us towards. And so create moments of transformation and inspiration and illumination with the leadership and throughout the congregation. And I pray especially for those who have listened this morning and who will listen afterwards. For each person, may they sense your presence in their life in a powerful and transformative way. And we give this day to you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Oh, man. Kent, thank you so much. What a joy. And it's been fun to watch the comments coming down the line here, because you got a lot of people who are just in agreement and ready to say, all right, let's do it.
I believe all that. I believe all that. Now, can I listen to this afterwards? Can I see those comments?
You can go to to Sunrise Facebook page, and you'll be able to find it right there.
Oh, and I can read all the comments. Wonderful.
You can read all the comments.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, and for those of you out there, if you tune in next week, we are going to have Jim Jessup from William Jessup University be our guest.
He's a good dude.
And Jim and I are going to have a good time talking legacy. Jim's father passed away. Bryce passed away several months ago. But we're going to look back over Bryce's legacy and talk about some of the things that God is doing through this season. So excited for that. Coming up on Pastors Live on Wednesday, Luke and I are going to be with you, and we're going to be talking about some new things that are going to be opening up here in the coming days and weeks. So you don't want to miss Pastors Live at 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon. Otherwise, we hope you're able to watch or listen to the Luke Miller podcast starting Thursday afternoon, and join us Sunday morning at 9 and 10:30. Registration is open if you're going to come in person. So you just go to sunrise.church, and on the front page, you can click register to sign up and reserve your space for Sunday morning. All right. I think I've said all of the things I need to say, and this is where I stop the live stream, say goodbye to you all. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.